Okay, it's 1:30 on Wednesday, July 22nd, and I'll call to order the July meeting of the Kokomo Traffic Commission. No old business to cover. What I would like to do quickly, I was planning on doing quickly, is to, as this is the first meeting of the Traffic Commission with its current membership that is for this year, I wanted to go over quickly what the responsibilities of the Traffic Commission are, what the expectations are. This board is commission is an advisory commission to the City Council. Typically, the decisions that we make are recommendations to the City Council for ordinance changes. We also respond to citizen concerns about specific traffic-related issues. We are also tasked with approving street closure and block party permits, and those functions typically used to happen by the entire board, but it got a little bit cumbersome, so that function is occurring just with the president approves those after consulting with the traffic foreman and KPD. So those items typically do not come to the full Traffic Commission. So with that, I'm going to start with our agenda. The agenda was put together as these are the issues that I have seen and I feel like the Traffic Commission needs to consider. For the most part, most of the items on this agenda will result in a recommendation to the City Council for an ordinance change. But does anybody have any questions? All right, well, we'll get into it. Item one under new business is to consider an always stop at Phillip Street and Morgan Street. I think everybody's got a packet. It includes a memo. I'll just go ahead and read the memo for the record. In December of 2019, the city temporarily established this intersection as an always stop to address the issues that arose after Morgan Street was extended to Judson Road by the county. A traffic study was performed and determined that the intersection warrants being established as an always stop. A copy of that traffic analysis is attached on the subsequent pages. To properly update the code, the following items should be removed from Schedule 7. In the city ordinance, there are numerous schedules. One schedule is Schedule 7, Stop Streets and Alleys, and that citation in the ordinance that needs to be removed is Morgan Street stopping at Phillips. Furthermore, the following should be added to Schedule 7, Stop Streets and Alleys, and that in the B section of Schedule 7 is the always stop portion of that schedule, and the description is Morgan Street and Phillip Street. So the analysis that was performed in March. And we determined that by the volume splits that the intersection warrants an always stop. And so I am recommending that the Traffic Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council to update the ordinance. Is there any discussion? Any discussion from the audience? Come to the microphone. Yep. State your name and address for the record.
Name's Greg Taylor, address 1914 Mestiato Court, Kokomo, Indiana. Is all, ways into that street in the city?
Yes, technically every approach is in the city. The west approach on Judson, which is Morgan until it gets to where Judson tees in. So the west approach is just in the right-of-way of Phillips is in the city limits.
Okay.
Once it gets west of the West Phillips Street right-of-way, then it's outside city limits, which is why only the city needs to update their ordinance, the county doesn't.
That was my question.
Yep. Any other discussion? I need a motion.
I'd move that we recommend the Traffic Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council to update the ordinance with regard to the always stop at Phillips Street and Morden Street.
Second.
I'll second.
Been motioned and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That gets forwarded to the city council and will be represented by Mr. Acorn. The next item on the agenda is item number 2, consider Ivy Hills subdivision speed limits. Items 2 and 3 are extremely similar. They're 2 different subdivisions. So I'm probably just going to read the first. The memos are basically identical. But we'll start with item 2, or the Ivy Hills subdivision. Over the past several years, the city has established speed limits in subdivisions without through traffic as 25 miles per hour. When Ivy Hills was annexed in 2012, the county had already established the subdivision as 30 miles per hour. I'd like for the Traffic Commission to consider recommending to the City Council reducing the speed limit to 25 miles an hour. And then to properly update the code, the following items should be modified with Schedule 5 speed limits generally. And every street in Ivy Hills subdivision is identified in their between intersections, as well as the speed limit of 25 miles an hour. In general, back as far as the mid-2000s, we started establishing neighborhoods that have limited entrances and exits and extremely limited through traffic as 25 miles per hour instead of the 30 miles per hour that most residential streets are identified in the city. And I feel like it is beneficial for the neighborhood to reduce that speed limit from 30 to 25. I believe that most of the traffic is already traveling at about 25 miles per hour. I have gotten some speeding complaints, and while speed limits don't necessarily establish general speeds that people drive, I believe it will help reduce the excessive speeding in the neighborhood and in general improve the environment for the residents. Does anybody have any questions about it? Concerns? Any questions or concerns from the audience?
I'd move we recommend to the Traffic Commission a favorable recommendation to the City Council to update the ordinance with regards to changing the speed limit at Ivy Hills subdivision.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to modify the speed limits in Ivy Hills subdivision, or recommend to the council to modify the speed limits in the Ivy Hills subdivision. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 3 is exactly the same as item 2, except this is Stony Brook subdivision. Stony Brook subdivision includes streets such as Beechwood Lane, Gray Twig Drive, Hawthorne Lane, Eastbrook Drive, Willow Springs Road, and Briarwood Court. This subdivision has one entrance and exit. I would say there's roughly 65 houses in the neighborhood. It is south of Southway Boulevard, just west of Goya. Again, this is a subdivision that was annexed in the east side annexation that was went into effect in January of 2012. It was previously established at 30 miles per hour. We've had complaints about the speed limit from the residents, and I feel it is appropriate to modify the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. Any questions or concerns from the board? Any from the audience?
I'd make a motion that the Traffic Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council to update the ordinance and the speed limits for Stony Brook subdivision.
Yeah, second it.
Been motion and second to modify the speed limits in Stony Brook subdivision. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is consider handicap space at Mulberry Street and Main Street. This memo I put together reads as follows. The Veteran Affairs Office, located at Main and Mulberry, has requested an additional handicap space at the first space east of Main on the south side of Mulberry. The closest handicap space is the first space south of Mulberry on the east side of Main. The purpose of the space is to improve the service to the Veterans Affairs Office, although any vehicle with a properly displayed handicap sticker or plate would be able to park in the space. There is no requirement for this space to be identified in the ordinance. The ordinance only states that, quote, "The City Traffic Commission shall reserve parking spaces on municipally owned lots as prescribed by law. The number of reserved spaces so provided shall, at a minimum, comply with the provisions of IC 51692. In addition, the commission shall reserve parking on city streets as required to be used for the exclusive use of the physically handicapped persons." This request came specifically from the Veteran Affairs, and I don't believe it will negatively impact the overall parking situation in this area of downtown. Does anybody have any questions?
I presume that we're in compliance with IC 516-9-2, and this would just increase the number of reserved spaces, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And I'm not familiar with all the details of IC 51692, but the ordinance gives you the indication that that is specifically for the parking lots and not for city streets. But I believe we are in this situation.
Okay.
And they're just wanting one additional space?
One additional space. It's closer to their front door.
I got you. I'm familiar with the area, so I was thinking that one was like right by their door, so.
It's close. It's probably not much closer than the other one, but it's much more obvious for people who are going there to see that one than they will the other one. If they're going east on Mulberry, they won't ever see the one on Main. So. Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'd move that the Traffic Commission approve the handicap parking space at Mulberry and Main.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve a handicap space in the east of Main on the south side of Mulberry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That is item, sure I have my agenda.
4.
That was item
4
4.
to 5.
All right, item 5. So earlier this year, we began to look at the city's school zones. Our school zone, there are specific items in the ordinance that identify speed in school zones and identifies generally school zones. It appears to have not been updated since 1975. So this is, I've provided a memo that provides some recommendations on improvements to the ordinance that would then be, some of which have happened already over the years, and some of which I believe would be beneficial if they were modified. I'm going to go through those specifically. The city, reading the memo, the city school zone codes have not been updated since 1975. Below are proposed changes. We can probably discuss each one of these individually. The first one is to include colleges, specifically IUK and Ivy Tech. IUK has become much more of a walking campus. There are sidewalks being designed right now on the perimeter. The city is designing those and speeds in that around Ivy Tech or IUK and Ivy Tech, which has also become more pedestrian, should be encouraged to be lowered. So by including colleges into the ordinance, we can sign those as school zones. Item number 2, including no turn on red indications for signals near schools. Last fall, we were approached by Kokomo School Corporation to restrict right turn movements at some signalized intersections near schools with specific time indicators. We did that. However, the ordinance has not been updated. Item number 3, remove Jefferson School Zone on East Hoffer. Jefferson School was torn down in the early 2000s and is obviously no longer a school. It is not signed that way now, so this is just a cleanup to the ordinance. Remove Temple Baptist Church School Zone on Goya Road. Every indication I've gotten is that Temple Baptist Church is not operating a school at that location. Remove Roosevelt School Zone on North Washington Street. Roosevelt School was also torn down in the early 2000s and obviously is not, will not be in session this fall. So that can be cleaned up and removed. Item number 6, remove Washington School Zone from South Washington. It is technically not a school. It is still is being used as an administrative office. There are playgrounds there though, however, so I've placed this one in there, but I think this is one that could be, could have some further discussion on it. As far as I know, those, that playground is still accessible. However, typically when you have a school zone, the expectation is that you're gonna see students going to and from the school, during school hours. And that playground area is obviously not going to be used in those times. It may be more appropriate to just install warning signs for a playground on Washington versus establishing Washington as a school zone. Remove TP Drive entry from in the table. TP Drive is near Indian Heights Elementary. And the reason that I've got that identified in here, I will explain that further down. Well, I'll just explain it further down. Same with Wigwam Drive in the table. There's a table that establishes speed limits when children are present, and I'll explain that when we get to it. Item 9, remove East Morgan Street. East Morgan Street is identified between Apperson and Ohio as a school zone. It is currently, it's on it, and I'm not sure why it was ever established that way. It's not signed that way. There is currently the school walking routes that I have indicate that it is the boundary between two different school walking routes. So the volume of students walking on there on a boundary would be extremely low if there are any. And there wouldn't be anybody crossing if you've got two different school walking route boundaries. They're not going to cross Morgan. It's not signed, like I said, and so at this point I don't feel like it's necessary to have it in the ordinance. And then item 10 relates to item 7 and 8. First of all, item 10 identifies states this: in Schedule 6, which is speed and school zones, my recommendation is to reduce the speed to 25 miles per hour when children are present. Currently, in the ordinance, it states 30 miles per hour, which, for the most part, speeds in schools, around schools now, are already 30 miles an hour. So the current ordinance does not reduce the speeds at the school zones, which is kind of odd. And I never quite understand why we had this item in there if it really wasn't lowering speeds. Because typically your residential streets around these school areas are 30 already. So what happens is when you reduce that speed from 30 to 25, the items for TP and Wigwam, those items are establishing that area as 25. So they're no longer necessary. If we do 10, then 7 and 8 aren't, then you don't need TP Drive or Wigwam Drive specifically identified because they're already within a block of the school. And that's how the schools are identified, the school zones are identified. They're identified as streets within a radius of one city block and passing any elementary, secondary, or parochial school in the city. That's what designates a school zone. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about any of these items before I go through the specific recommendations to update the
Well, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but on number 6, remove Washington School Zone. I know from Washington Street, from Markland to Boulevard, it's 30. I don't know if they did that because Washington School was still a school at that time, or if that can be moved back up to 35, what it was.
Yeah.
And then from from Boulevard to Lincoln, leave it at, the reduced rate because of IUK.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'm just thinking about proposing to adjust from 30
And
to 35
Yep.
from Markland to Boulevard.
I'm not sure why South Washington from.
'Cause it used to be
was-
35
It
and
used
they
to be
reduced it.
35. Yep. I feel like what's probably appropriate is to do a speed study and determine what the speeds are being, what speeds we have, and use that as an indicator to help determine what that speed is. So I'll put that on my list to do, and that's something we can address in the future.
Isn't the road, Markland into the downtown area, it's 35 in that
That's
stretch?
35 because that is a state highway.
It used to be a state highway.
Yeah. North
but-
of Markland was a state highway.
Okay.
That's why they controlled that. But
There
yeah,
is-
You're right, it's 35.
There is existing in the ordinance, we did, there was, anyway, I thought. No, there's not.
I would agree with Heath on the 35 mile an hour through there, though. I mean, it used to be that way, and I think that if you look at it out there,
And
the traffic
that's-
still goes.
Yep, and that is the challenge
At
with
least.
trying to establish any artificially low speed limit. If you have an artificially low speed limit, it doesn't do you any a service. If there are speeds that are excessive in an area, reducing the speed limit doesn't help. Sometimes it doesn't help as much as it hurts because you've got so many people exceeding the speed limit, and then it just completely gets ignored. There are times where I think you might be able to tweak it down, just like we talked about in residential areas, but having an appropriate speed limit for the existing speeds, I think is beneficial. And if the speeds need to be reduced, then we need to figure out, is there another way to reduce speeds through some sort of traffic calming or additional enforcement or something like that.
And your signs for the park at the Washington School, I think that's appropriate due to the fence. They actually still have their fence up around there.
Yep.
So I think that would.
And I think that would help. It's not excessive. I mean, it's certainly appropriate, and I think it would add caution for drivers as well as reduce the speeds around Effenball probably a little bit. Even if we eventually increase the speed limit to a more appropriate speed limit, I think it would be a benefit, so.
I agree.
Okay. I'm going to go through the specific recommended updates to the ordinance. To properly update the code, the following items should be modified in Schedule 6, speed in school zones. Section A, the streets within a radius of 1 block and passing any elementary, secondary, or added university or parochial school in the city are designated as school zones. It shall be unlawful for any person to drive any vehicle over and on a street or within a school zone at a speed greater than 25 miles per hour, also added when children are present, except as follows. Let me go through this here real quick. The table below is a modified copy of the table that is in the existing ordinance. Right now we have Berkeley in the Kokomo High School and Boulevard School zone at 35 miles per hour, except when children are present, then 25 miles per hour. Dixon Road at Wallace School, which is Jefferson Street and to 77 north 750 feet, 35 miles per hour, except when children are present, 25 miles per hour. East Fisher Street, which is Bon Air, from La Fountain from Ohio Street as 25 miles per hour. And that's 25 miles per hour all the time. East Sycamore, which is Sycamore School, Ohio Street to the US, it needs to be State Road 931, bypass as 35 miles an hour, when children are present, 25 miles per hour. Goya Road for Darrow Chapel School, and this is the Markland Avenue, this would be Goya Road from Markland Avenue, between Markland Avenue and Arnold Street, when children are present, 25 miles per hour. Some of these, what we're establishing is a boundary that is greater than that 1 block. So if you see something that's just 25, but you don't see a 35 that goes with it, it's because what we're trying to do is establish an area that is outside of that initial 1 block area, because students are walking or are in an area that are outside the implicit 1 block space. Lincoln Road, Maple Crest School from La Fountain and Webster is set as 35 miles per hour, except when children are present, 25 miles per hour. Park Road, which is Maple Crest School from Deffenbaugh to Lincoln as 35 miles per hour, except when children are present, 25 miles per hour. And West Boulevard for Boulevard School, a point 300 feet east of Berkeley and a point 600 feet west of Berkeley as 35 miles per hour, except when children are present, which is 25 miles per hour. There's a lot of wording in there. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Schedule 11 is the no right turn on red for signalized intersections, and the 5 locations below are the locations where the school has recommended that the no right turn on red be established. Berkeley Boulevard in Berkeley, that's just an eastbound right turn on red, and Superior and Apperson, that's all directions. Markland and Cooper, that's all directions. Jefferson and Corby, that's just westbound, and then Lincoln and Webster is all directions. And the timing on there also needs to be established in the ordinance at 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. My plan, once this goes into effect, is to establish an updated signing package for every school, and we'll update the signs, not just not just the signs that meet this ordinance, but to meet the updates from the Indiana Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. A number of the signs that we have at school areas in school zones do not need to be updated in order to make that in order to make all of our signs compliant. So there's a significant number of updates that need to happen regardless of what we do to the ordinance, but there are obviously some things in the ordinance that need to be updated too. So, anybody have any questions?
So just a couple. Why are you're changing the speed limits to 25 at all times as opposed to when children are present in certain circumstances?
So I think you're talking about
East Fisher Street?
East
Bonnet.
Fisher, so I think I need to add another item in here for 30 miles an hour. Well, it really just needs to be 25 miles an hour when children are present, added to that item, and I think there's a couple of other ones in here. The original, at one point in time, I went back and forth about it because at one point in time I considered, rather than making a speed limit 30 miles an hour and then having a 25 mile an hour when children are present, I thought, well, why don't we just make them 25 miles an hour? The challenge is that the way the manual's written, there isn't a specific way in the ordinance, we can do it that way, but it makes the signage, you can't, how do I put this? There's specific signage as to how you do it how you reduce the speed limit when children are present and it's in a school zone, and so you're creating this identification for the driver that, hey, you're entering a school zone. To enter a school zone and reduce the speed limit without making it specifically when children are present doesn't quite lock in with with the manual the way it's supposed to, the way you would think it would. I think it'll mess with drivers, because here you're going to see a 25 mile an hour speed and a school zone. There's a specific school zone sign, but every time you're supposed to see the school zone sign with a speed limit, the speed limit is supposed to say when children are present. There's no establishment of an all-time speed limit. So I thought, well, in order to make it consistent, we should make it 30 miles an hour. And then I don't think I changed this table. So everywhere where there isn't a 35 mile an hour, it just needs to be when children are present with it. Because we have an implicit residential streets are 30 miles an hour if they're not specifically identified in the ordinance. So East Fisher is when children are present. And then hold on a second. That one's right, that one's right, that one's right. Berkeley's right. Goya is, what's Goya established right now?
The only issue I see here with your East Fisher one is Fountain Street to Ohio. I mean, that's a 6-7 block radius there that goes.
Yep.
And there's a lot of stop signs. It's in my area, so I know very well.
Yep.
But here's the other thing. It's 2 blocks from the school. You didn't do anything about Gerhardt.
Gerhardt is already
marked presently.
I have to look and see how it's marked presently, but by the ordinance, Gerhardt, a block either side of the school is inside the school zone. When we actually get in there and look and see specifically where that school zone should end, it's a little bit. You can't say consistently it's 1 block, it's 1 block, it's 1 block, because some blocks are longer than others. There's other things going on, and so we'll have to take we'll have to look at it on a case by case basis. But for I feel like for the purpose of the ordinance, one block is the most succinct way of establishing a typical school zone. This is the way it was, has been, and I think it's mainly because the expectation is that students are going to walk on Fisher for the most part rather than walk on Gerhardt. That's the only thing I can. That's the only thing I can think
It's
of.
understandable because there's no sidewalks there.
If there's no sidewalks on Gerhardt, then
So, well,
then-
on Fisher Street, there's no sidewalks until you get
Oh.
into the Bon Air, actually get into the addition part. The
Okay.
side, most of the side streets that don't have any sidewalks that, and I don't believe there's one in front of Bon Air Park either by the shelter house. I don't think there, might be one across the street, but I think that's where it kicks in. But there's just no
Okay.
sidewalks from Apperson Way to at least Purdom Street. I don't know of any sidewalks that's over there, so that could be the reason.
that could have
it's
been
that
why it was established that way. As far as I know, this is, I've run this stuff through, I've run at least the schools by Kokomo schools, and they have,
You know, I'm all about safety for kids. So
Yep.
you're not hurting my feelings any. I
Okay.
mean, if you gotta go 25 for a minute, that's just, I mean, I drive a truck every day, so I'm used
Yep.
to having to slow down and do different things that most common folks wouldn't do. But so I don't have an issue
Yep.
with anything as
Okay.
far as that. I just, my issue was that it was a large stretch from Fountain to Ohio Street. You know,
Yep.
it seemed like a large span there to keep, but there is several stop signs in between, so I don't think there's an issue there really.
okay. I'm pull up.
Now, the Markland at Arnold Street, Markland Avenue at Arnold for Dar Chapel, and I understand why you're trying to do that, but are we slowing down the traffic on Markland to 25? Is that what we're trying to do?
It's Goyer that we're
So
slowing
actually,
traffic
we're
down
slowing
from
traffic
Markland
on
to
Goyer
Arnold
from-
Street.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Because I was going to say he'll have his hands full out there then.
yeah,
No.
no,
You're not gonna slow Markland down like that.
no, but hold on a second, let me pull up, speed limits.
That's just gonna be on Goyer north of Markland, is what I think that's referring to.
Now, when you guys do set up like a patrol for school zones, do you do that on just on a random basis, or do you do that on clarification of having some issues in an
Basically,
area?
if we're getting a lot of complaints.
Okay.
You know, most of your complaints, most of them's not speeding, believe it or not, it's bus arm violations. So that's most of our school-related complaints.
And that one I just won't never swallow. I just can't figure it out why you would go around a bus. I just don't get it.
I would assume it's
In a hurry, I
oncoming,
guess.
it's almost as much oncoming traffic, I mean.
Yeah.
You gotta think about getting around one, but when someone's coming at you and you don't really have to change lanes, you're just not paying
A
attention.
lot of that's a timing thing too, that we try to tell bus drivers, because sometimes at the last minute, as they're stopping, they're throwing their arm out. So the drivers don't have time to really react, but then they complain on them. So sometimes it's a training issue with the bus drivers of, hey, put your arm out first, let that thing come on for a second before you're stopping. That way you're warning people behind you, in front of you first.
You know, Heath, the one I don't get, and I drive 1,000 miles a week, so, but the one I don't get, and I wish they would just stop doing it completely, is when they'll turn their yellow lights on and leave them on for a while, and then the cars will still
Let-
be.
let the cars
and
go
they-
by.
You know, they're waiting to, kind of doing it, quarter of a mile before their stop. I just think they should get the red lights on. That way it's preparing people
That's what I was
to
saying,
stop.
turn everything on, and let
Yes.
everybody know that it's coming.
Don't
Yeah.
caution and let people get by, because I think that's where some confusion comes. I see that all the time.
That's like when you
so.
come up to a yellow light, a lot of people gas it to get through there.
Yeah.
Well, same thing when they see a yellow bus,
Yeah.
the school bus.
My truck's slow, so I gotta stop.
Goyer Road is established as 35 miles per hour in the actual speed limit ordinance the entire way, so I don't, it's not necessary to add another item in here. Then there was, Dixon's already identified as 35 miles an hour too. I thought there was another 25 miles an hour. Oh, nope, I think that might be the only one. So,
So you have to do a speed study, right, Gary? Is that-
to update, to talk about Washington, if we're talking about modifying Washington speed, that, I think that does,
That's separate from
that's
this.
separate from, that's
Got it.
separate from this.
Got it.
We can legally establish any speed limit down to, I forget what the top is, but the bottom, you can take it down to 25 miles an hour specifically without a speed study. If you want to assign a speed limit lower than 25 miles an hour, it requires an engineering study.
Okay.
But there's a 30 or 25 you can establish without a study.
Do you want to table this till our next meeting
We can
or modify it, I suppose is my question.
modify the,
Well, do you
Yeah.
need to add anything for East Fisher?
we can, I would like to, I'd like to get everything but but this table, approved and through. So let me think about that.
Because you're going to have school starting here.
Yeah,
before
and
long,
we're
too.
gonna have, it's gonna take, right now, I've started going through each of the schools, school zones, and identifying where existing signage is and where signage needs to be modified. And there's a significant number. It's gonna take a couple of months to get all that put together, and get installed. There's upwards of 200 signs that need to be modified or installed. So, these items, this is really, the changing from 30 to 25 for the one block in those areas, we can do just about everything we need to do, without modifying this table just yet. So I can take another look at that table, and then we can review it. I just don't know exactly how to put that into a motion, unless you just say approve items 1 through 10, except for that tape with the table in B, which is Schedule 6B. Does anybody in the audience have any questions about this?
Just to be clear, so are you asking for a motion for items 1 through 9? Or are you asking through 1 through 10?
1 through 10, except for the table in Schedule 6B,
Okay.
because that'll still establish the 25 miles per hour when children are present instead of the 30.
Got it. Yep.
And then that one table where that table is supposed to establish speed limits in areas that are greater than 30 miles an hour. So that's that table I need to look at again.
All right. I'd move to approve items 1 through 9, 1 through 10, but for the table depicted in 10B, and recommend that the Traffic Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the council for the school zones.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That is all of the items specifically to changes. I don't know what happened to my agenda. I got so many pieces of paper here. Oh, here it is. Okay, so moving on to old business. We don't have any old business. Status reports, accident report. Do we have an accident report? Okay, that's okay. Oh, we do have it. We have the
Yeah,
items
down at the
there.
bottom.
Yep. So from January to June of 2020, we had 577 property damage accidents, 79 personal injury accidents, 1 fatality, a total number of accidents of 657. Next item is construction report. I've provided a memo that indicates 10 different projects that are being conducted or in some manner or fashion in design or construction, just for the general information for the members. Anybody have any questions on that? Ordinance is pending by council meeting. I believe there are not.
There's none at the moment.
Not yet? Yeah.
Not yet, not yet. I would like to say something about the accidents because it was brought to our attention at a council meeting the other day. And it was concerned that, and I'm assuming that they're talking, the 500 and some of these were Highway 931, is what we was told. And that it's the traffic lights, the automatic yellow turn, Hopper Street being the worst. I'm thinking he probably knows.
I have talked to Mike Karakoff recently, I say recently, probably a couple of years ago, in regards to the flashing yellow arrows, and that's your fatality you see there?
Yes.
That's the flashing yellow at Center and 931. I was on that one, motorcycle. So I've expressed it to him a couple times that, in my opinion, mine only, we do away with the yellow flag, because they altered it to different times.
Yes.
Well, during those different times, you're still having the accidents. Just in my opinion, the problems are the elderly people.
Mm-hmm.
They just do not get the flashing yellow arrow. I don't care what time you make it, they don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
They see the flashing yellow arrow and they just, I can go.
Right.
In my opinion, I explained it to him, hey, I just think we need to do away with them. But that's the state's call. That's
what I
not
wondered,
ours.
does the state still control
That's,
that?
the state controls that.
State does.
Major Selden has done a report to him that I forwarded to him a couple of years ago on the accidents. Whenever we get dispatched to Hoffer 931, Markland doesn't do it because you have two lane, I mean, but North, Morgan, Hoffer, Boulevard, we know what the accident is before we can get there. Sure enough, when we get there, that's it.
Yeah, and that's what they said in the meeting, that it was like 560 of the accidents that we've had.
I don't think there's 560 accidents on 931 and 10 on someplace else. No, I think they're fairly, and I can get you that information specifically.
I wasn't sure, that's what I was
No,
asking.
no, it's, there are,
I mean, if we're
That's
having that many accidents out there,
577
why
property
wouldn't they-
damage throughout the whole city.
yeah, that's,
That's what that is.
and that's fairly, and I can get you
I work
specifically
accidents, so I
where.
know
Yeah.
that's throughout the whole city.
Yep.
Okay.
And
But we do know that when we get sent to those intersections, it's either, number one, turning on the yellow, disregarding or failure to
failure
yield.
to yield.
Or somebody's rear-ended to somebody else, either thinking they took off from the light and they didn't. I mean, that's generally your two accidents. But we're not too concerned about the little rear-enders. Those are slow-speed stuff. But it's the ones when they're turning and you got a 45 mile an hour, at least 45 mile an hour zone, sometimes they're doing more than that, coming through. And basically what is happening is they're turning on yellow, but the reason they don't see the oncoming vehicles is there's probably a big truck or something sitting in the other turn lane across from them, blocking their view. So typically that's the cause of, they'll say, I didn't see it, there was a truck parked there. So
I've actually seen an accident at Hoffer in
930, yeah, we work a lot of them. I mean, there was one time I worked 3 in one day there for the exact same reason. I mean, your dad sees them all the time, it's right there.
That particular area, the council heard of somebody talk about that the other day, and we would be, whatever we could do as a commission, we would be favorable to cut that out if you could.
I would,
make that
I have had, the conversations I've had, there's NDOT's divided up into different regions. There's a Greenfield region in the Greenfield district, and the Greenfield district manages all the state roads in Howard County. there's a Greenfield traffic engineer, and I've had several conversations with the Greenfield traffic engineer about it. A year and a half or so ago, I looked at the number of accidents at not every intersection has the four-section head. But I looked at, actually, from a statistical standpoint, what has happened since those were installed. And it was by pure number, it was kind of a mixed bag. There were a couple of intersections that did look like accidents had been reduced since those were installed. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's because of the signal, or it just could be a reduced volume at that intersection. But and there were a couple that were significantly increased. And then, like what was said, there was a situation when they originally set them up. They were you have the protected movement, which is the green arrow, which allows you to turn without yielding to oncoming traffic. Then there's the permissive movement, which is a flashing yellow arrow that requires you to yield to oncoming traffic. Originally, they had the protected movement and the permissive movement operational at all times. Since they had seen a spike in accidents, in some intersections, they had reduced the amount of time that the permissive movement was in the cycle. At peak hour, when there's a lot of traffic, they wouldn't allow that permissive movement. It would just be protected, which is what I think a number of them were before it was. When these things were installed, there wasn't a permissive movement. If I remember right, a lot of them, it was a 3-section head, and so you either got the green or you stopped. And so to improve efficiency, it was an efficiency improvement, not a safety. They didn't go from a 5-section head. The 5-section head has the green arrow and the green ball and the amber arrow and the amber ball and then the red. They didn't go from a 5-section head to a 4-section head, which the 5-section head and the 4-section head do a very similar thing. They're a little different, but they went from a 3-section head to a 4-section head, which created that permissive movement. Unfortunately, I feel like there was probably some additional analysis that probably could have been done, or definitely additional improvements that could be made, because like he said, the problem you have from a visibility standpoint is a geometric issue, right. And that geometric issue wasn't addressed when the signals were upgraded. I know that NDOT is making plans for additional upgrades to the signals that were not switched over from 5-section or from the 3-section head to the 4-section head. I have not seen a set of those plans. They may run them by me, but they won't. I may get an opportunity to comment. I don't know whether my comments will make any difference. I've already told them that I prefer not to have the 4-section head, and I was told that that's the NDOT standard is the 4-section head. So, not to say that you couldn't go back to a 3-section head if you really felt like it was important to eliminate the permissive movement altogether. It does reduce efficiency.
I personally get through them no problem. I mean, but that's just me. I don't have any issues. But I'm a guy that works in Carmel all the time, so the roundabouts are kind of
yeah.
I'm friendly to them.
It's normally our elderly people that get confused at it.
Yep,
and
those are the ones.
See.
And those are the ones that's going to get hurt more.
If you don't live in Carmel or around there and you're not used to them roundabouts every day, you would probably be in big trouble.
But the fatality of the day, that wasn't an elderly person.
Yep, it wasn't.
It was
just somebody who couldn't see around.
Couldn't see around the vehicle.
Yeah, it's because the left turns. Typically, when you design an intersection with left turns, you try and line them up. So if you're making a left turn and the person opposing you is making a left turn, you're looking at each other right in the face.
Right.
Well, on a divided highway, that's not the case. They're offset, and that provides this visibility issue to oncoming traffic when you're trying to yield, and you really just want to, scooch out there if you're having visibility, or wait until that driver has is able. The last thing you want to also do is be the block for person who's also making a left.
And that's what we were saying about Hoffer, it's so offset that if you get
It
4 or
is.
5 cars down through there, you might.
You can't see.
one will
And,
hide.
and some of it's a vertical issue too while you're at it. I mean, if the roadway's going up, you can see some of those drivers coming up, or going down, if the roadway's coming up, and it's easier for that driver to block the visibility of the other drivers, so.
We would be favorable to not having them. I know.
I think,
When I work those wrecks, I get complaints every time from the people I'm working on. You guys, said, whoa, no.
Yeah.
It's not the city of Kokomo, it's the state of Indiana. You need to take it up with them. I said, we have preached to them. I said, it is not the city.
And-
So
and I
I try
think-
to defer it,
Yep.
but
I'll see if I can
happens in the
help,
city, so they think it's us.
Mike out a little bit, maybe I'll.
I think what I think needs to happen is there needs to be an in-depth investigation as to if what we're all experience it, we drive through there all the time, but is there data that says there is conclusively one decision? Well, I feel like it needs to be a data-driven decision, not necessarily a, hey, we think there's a problem, but I would want to see the data. And I think the data would show that, but I think what NDOT needs to do is do a detailed evaluation of the accidents at those intersections and identify the time, when things were done, when changes were made, and how those changes affected statistically the accidents that are occurring at those intersections, and then make a decision as to how best to reduce those accidents. Maybe it is going back to a 3-section head, maybe it's to reconstruct the intersection. That's really, I mean, there's a lot of
gonna be expensive.
Yeah, it is expensive, but it's also, I mean, you look at State Road 26 and 931, that thing needs reconstructed.
We work a lot there.
Yeah. And those speeds are even higher. And,
Yeah, because you're 50 and 55 through there now.
yeah, and the approaches on either side don't make any sense. You've got a through lane that turns into a left turn lane, then you got a straight right on the other side. So everybody's lane shifting on their way through the intersection, and it really causes a lot of confusion. I think there are 4-section heads at that intersection
They are
too.
center and there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, and I'll be happy to, on behalf of the Traffic Commission, send a letter to the Greenfield Traffic Engineer expressing our concerns. Both with regard to the existing intersections, and any proposed intersection improvements that are being planned, because I believe they are being planned.
I would think that they could pull up our 30 yields at those intersections.
Yep.
And that's going to show them from the time they installed those till now, the increase
Yep.
of the accidents.
And I can pull that data up as well. I just want them to do it because they're the authority,
Right.
the authority on it, and,
It's their decision.
yeah,
but
yeah, so, okay. Currently, when we were starting this out in January, the expectation was we were gonna meet quarterly, and so I am going to let everybody know that tentatively our next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, October 21st. If we do have to meet prior to that, it would be on a Wednesday at 1:30, unless there's something else that's pressing that would necessitate us for some reason to change that in order to get a quorum. But plan on Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 as our next meeting. And there will be likely just as many items as there was on this one. We'll also bring back the table from Schedule 6B. And then I've got a number of other items that I just didn't want to put on this because we're already an hour and 5 minutes. But that we'll be discussing. So if anything, if anybody has any issues between now and then, any items they'd like to see on the agenda, please let me know and I'll make sure it gets on there.
Great.
Do I need a motion to adjourn, or can I just adjourn?
I'd move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.